Do you remember the household items that once defined life in the 70s and 80s America? They filled homes with personality and comfort, shaping the rhythm of daily living before technology changed everything. When did the ordinary things that made life feel so full quietly disappear? Cornflower blue. Corningware dishes were more than cookware. They were a symbol of trust. Every mother, grandmother, and aunt had a stack of them, their glossy white bodies stamped with that delicate blue flower pattern. You could bake, freeze, or microwave them, and somehow they would always survive. Each dish was passed from oven to table like a badge of care, the kind of thing that stayed warm long after the meal was gone. Even when one was chipped or stained, no one dared throw it away. It had history baked into its surface. They sat on stovetops and holiday tables for decades, carrying everything from tuna casseroles to Sunday roasts. Each one bore tiny scratches and faded spots that told stories only family could recognize. These dishes didn't chip, crack, or fade, no matter how many family reunions or church potlucks they endured. They were indestructible in a way that felt comforting, reliable like the women who used them. Every casserole that came out of those dishes carried more than food, it carried a family's story. Today, people hunt for them in thrift stores, trying to touch a piece of that everyday magic. The simple blue flowers became a kind of heirloom, quietly reminding us that some things were built to last. Amberglass dinnerware was what every family thought looked elegant back then. Heavy, warm, and impossible to break. The golden brown plates glowed under dim kitchen lights, reflecting the soft, smoky tones of the 1970s. Dinner felt a little fancier when served on them, even if it was just meatloaf and instant mashed potatoes. They clinked softly against formica tables and matched perfectly with harvest gold appliances. Even when the food was simple, those amber plates made it feel like a feast. The amber hue made everything seem cozy, as though each meal came with a built-in sunset. Even water looked richer in those glasses, shimmering like honey beneath the light of a hanging lamp. These were dishes that could survive a fall from the counter and a lifetime in the dishwasher. Their thick glass and honey tint turned ordinary meals into family rituals. Over time, though, they lost their sparkle, replaced by bright plastics and disposable plates. Now, when you find one at a garage sale, the nostalgia hits instantly. You can almost hear the clink of forks and the soft hum of conversation from decades ago. Avocado green appliances were more than a color. They were a mood. From refrigerators to blenders, that earthy green hue ruled every American kitchen. It was bold, cozy, and just a little rebellious, the color of optimism wrapped in formica and chrome. It clashed gloriously with orange countertops and mustard curtains, a riot of confidence in every corner. Even now, you can spot that green in old photos and instantly feel the warmth of home. It made kitchens feel alive, cheerful, and ready for company. Even when the power went out, those green machines still seemed to glow with personality. The 1970s believed in matching everything, and so kitchens glowed in shades of green that looked both fresh and lived in. Families cooked, gathered, and laughed around those machines, unaware they were designing an era's aesthetic. Today, people look back at those avocado tones with a mix of horror and affection. For all their garish charm, those appliances never really went out of style. They just waited for the next wave of nostalgia to bring them home again. Popcorn air poppers turned living rooms into miniature movie theaters. With a whir and a rush of warm air, kernels exploded into fluffy white clouds that filled every bowl in sight. Kids gathered around the counter, watching in awe as the popcorn burst out like a magic trick. Sometimes the popper would send a rogue kernel flying across the room, and laughter would follow like clockwork. Butter dripped down fingers, the smell filling every corner of the house with joy. The air filled with that unmistakable buttery smell, the kind that clung to furniture and pajamas long after the movie ended. It was messy, loud, and perfect. The soundtrack of laughter mixed with the rhythm of kernels hitting the bowl. No oil, no mess, just endless snacking potential. The smell of fresh popcorn mixed with the sound of laughter and the flicker of the television made Saturday nights unforgettable. Back then, a simple air popper could make an ordinary evening feel like an event. It wasn't just about the popcorn. It was about gathering together. Even now, that sound and smell can take you right back to a time when happiness came in a yellow plastic machine. Light-up touch lamps were pure magic to anyone who grew up in the 1980s. You didn't need a switch, just a fingertip. With a single touch, the lamp would glow brighter, shimmering off metallic shades that looked straight out of a science fiction movie. Kids couldn't resist tapping them over and over, fascinated by their strange power. Each touch felt like a tiny spark of control, like holding lightning in your hands. The gentle hum and glowing metal made even the darkest bedroom feel like a space station. They made even bedtime feel like a science experiment, a soft hum, a gentle flash, and a sense of wonder that never quite faded. For many kids, it was their first brush with technology that actually listened to them. They lit bedrooms and living rooms alike, humming softly as though alive. There was something futuristic and comforting about them, a small taste of wonder in everyday life. For many, those lamps symbolized modern living, the future, right there on your nightstand. Today, their warm glow feels like a portal back to the past, when technology still amazed us in the simplest ways. Color-changing fiber optic centerpieces were the crown jewels of 1980s decor. A bundle of delicate plastic strands shimmered in rainbow light, casting a soft, shifting glow across coffee tables and mantels. They looked like something from outer space, a little tacky, a little mesmerizing. Guests couldn't stop watching the colors fade from blue to pink to green, as if time itself were melting. When the lights went out, the room would glow like a dreamscape, quiet, hypnotic, alive. Families would gather around them during parties, letting the soft glow wash over laughter and music. Even when unplugged, they looked magical, frozen mid-dance in a tangle of light and memory. Kids would sit cross-legged in front of them, hypnotized by the glowing strands like they were watching fireworks underwater. Even adults couldn't resist turning off the lights just to see the room transform into a swirl of color. Every flicker of color felt alive, pulsing in rhythm with the hum of the house. They were futuristic sculptures that turned any room into a little slice of neon fantasy. Every home that wanted to feel modern had one proudly on display. They didn't just light up a room, they made people dream about the future. Now, seeing one in a thrift shop feels like stumbling upon a lost artifact from an age when color itself felt alive. Wooden salad bowls and tongs weren't just for salads. They were symbols of hospitality. Every 1970s dinner party had one in the center of the table, piled high with iceberg lettuce and drenched in tangy dressing. Their rich wood grain gleamed under the glow of amber lights, the scent of oil and vinegar mingling with laughter and conversation. Every scrape of the tongs echoed across the table, a soundtrack to family stories and second helpings. The bowls soaked in flavor over the years, a little garlic, a touch of vinegar, a trace of countless dinners. They were polished and re-oiled like heirlooms, treasured not for beauty but for the meals they witnessed. The tongs clacked together like punctuation marks in conversations that lasted late into the night. The bowls absorbed years of flavor, a little olive oil and memory in every groove. Even when they dulled with time, no one ever threw them out. They aged the same way people did, with character. People treated them like fine china, even though they were often bought at the local department store. Families polished them carefully, passing them down like treasures. To serve salad from one was to serve warmth and welcome. These bowls captured the spirit of togetherness, the kind that lingered long after dinner was done. Kitchen radios built into cabinets were the morning heartbeat of the American home. Before smartphones, before Bluetooth, those little boxes filled kitchens with news, weather, and oldies, while the smell of bacon filled the air. The dial clicked softly as hands turned the station, tuning in to familiar voices that felt like family. Some models even had built-in clocks or timers, blending perfectly into the rhythm of breakfast and busy mornings. Static would buzz as the coffee percolated, and that fuzzy sound somehow made everything feel more real. Kids would sit at the table, waiting for the school bus, listening to jingles and morning talk shows that seemed to last forever. Parents relied on that soft hum of chatter to fill the quiet before the day began. It wasn't just background noise, it was the soundtrack of daily life, comforting in its routine. The radio didn't just play music, it announced the start of another ordinary, wonderful day. Mothers hummed along to their favorite tunes while packing lunches. Fathers caught the headlines before work. The radio wasn't background noise, it was company. It marked the rhythm of the day, from sunrise toast to midnight snacks. Now, when we hear that warm, fuzzy static, it feels like a memory wrapped in sound, the soundtrack of a slower, kinder time. Plastic floor runners were the ultimate paradox of 1970s homekeeping, meant to protect but impossible to love. Clear and ridged, they stretched across shag carpets like invisible armor, guarding every inch from dirt and footprints. They squeaked under socks, jabbed at bare feet, and somehow never stayed flat. Every child learned the art of hopping from carpet to carpet, avoiding the painful plastic path of doom. The runners trapped air bubbles underneath, making odd squishing noises with every step. They curled at the edges and collected crumbs that no vacuum could reach. And still, every parent swore they were saving the carpet from ruin, as if the floor itself were a family treasure. The runners were supposed to preserve beauty, but all they really preserved were memories of discomfort. And yet, they became as familiar as the furniture itself. A sign that someone cared, maybe a little too much. Still, every parent swore by them, convinced that no guest should ever touch the sacred carpet underneath. They were a mark of pride, proof that a home was spotless, even if it didn't feel that way. Walking across one barefoot was a test of endurance. Surviving it was a childhood rite of passage. Today, they're remembered with both laughter and pain, a relic of when protection meant never actually feeling at home. Ceramic owl cookie jars were equal parts charming and terrifying. Their wide, unblinking eyes watched over the kitchen, guarding every treat inside. For kids, sneaking a cookie meant facing that silent stare, a challenge of courage and stealth. The lids always betrayed you, clattering like an alarm the second you lifted them. Each owl seemed to have its own personality, stern, goofy, or just slightly menacing. They sat proudly beside coffee makers and flour tins, always a little too large for the counter but impossible to hide. Some families even named theirs, giving the owls a kind of strange, sugary authority. The cookies inside were secondary. It was the ritual of sneaking past the owl that made childhood thrilling. They were handmade in every shade of brown, orange, and gold, blending perfectly with the earthy tones of the era. Each owl had its own personality, from goofy to regal, perched on the counter like a guardian of sugar. They were whimsical, strange, and utterly unforgettable. Every home had one, and every child knew exactly how loud the lid could clatter if they weren't careful. Looking back, those owls feel almost alive, goofy little sentinels of childhood mischief and sweet rewards. Padded toilet seats were the height of comfort and the height of embarrassment. Covered in soft vinyl that hissed when you sat down, they were supposed to make the bathroom feel more luxurious. Instead, they felt like sitting on a deflating pool float. But in the 1970s and 1980s, comfort was everything, even in the smallest room of the house. Bathrooms were decorated with shag rugs, pastel wallpaper, and seashell soap dishes, so why not a cushioned throne to match? They squeaked under pressure and groaned in protest, like a secret you couldn't hide. For kids, they were funny. For adults, they were dignity disguised as design. No one wanted to admit it, but once you got used to the warmth, you never wanted to go back to cold porcelain. They trapped warmth in the winter, squeaked in the summer, and always made guests pause before committing to a sit. Yet somehow, every home had one. The hiss was as familiar as the sound of running water, an oddly human sigh of relief. Over time, the vinyl would crack and peel, but no one could quite bring themselves to throw it out. It was proof that style and comfort had once gone hand in hand, even when maybe they shouldn't have. plug-in air fresheners with oil cartridges promised fresh mountain air in a plastic shell. They plugged into outlets like small miracles, glowing faintly as they puffed out invisible clouds of pine, lilac, or tropical breeze. For homeowners, they were modern marvels, the end of spray cans and matchsticks. The air felt cleaner, even if the scent was as artificial as it came. Sometimes the oil would drip down the wall, leaving strange glossy marks that no one dared mention. But the smell, sweet and strong, could mask anything from last night's fish dinner to a week's worth of laundry. Every plug-in felt like a badge of modern pride, humming softly beside the floral wallpaper. Every hallway smelled like a perfume counter at the mall, and everyone secretly loved it. They were the finishing touch in a freshly vacuumed home, proof that you cared, even if the mountain air came from a socket. And when the cartridge finally dried out, you knew it was time for a Saturday cleaning spree. Looking back, those little gadgets were less about the smell and more about the feeling. A house that seemed alive, humming gently with the scent of new. Crocheted tissue box covers were handmade masterpieces of confusion. Each one was lovingly crafted to disguise something no one ever minded seeing: a box of tissues. Yarn of every color twisted and looped into wild patterns, transformed plain cardboard into art that defied reason. They were bright, fuzzy statements of love, slightly itchy, slightly crooked, but proudly made by hand. Every household had one gifted by a relative who swore it tied the room together. They may have looked odd, but they carried something real: effort, time, and care woven into every loop. Some were shaped like dolls, some like poodles, and some like little houses, complete with windows and doors. Grandmothers made them for everyone, insisting they added warmth to the room. You'd smile politely as you pulled a tissue from a crocheted skirt and wondered if this counted as art or assault. They were everywhere, on nightstands, in bathrooms, and proudly displayed in living rooms like trophies of love and awkwardness. They may have hidden tissues, but they revealed something else entirely. A time when homemade meant heartfelt, even if it also meant a little bit strange. Fake fruit centerpieces were the crown jewels of 1970s dining tables, and nobody ever ate them. Perfectly polished plastic apples, grapes, and bananas sat under glass domes, gleaming like treasures from another world. They were supposed to represent abundance, health, and sophistication, but mostly they collected dust. Each piece had a strangely perfect shine, reflecting the light like something both real and fake at once. Every kid tried to sneak a taste, only to end up embarrassed and disappointed. But for all their flaws, those fake fruits were a point of pride, proof that beauty could be arranged and everlasting. You'd reach for a grape out of curiosity and nearly crack a tooth on plastic. Still, families kept them, adjusting the arrangement as though the fruit might someday ripen. Kids were scolded for touching them, which somehow made them all the more tempting. Those fake fruit bowls became part of the furniture, eternal, unchanging, and faintly sticky. Now they're relics of an era that wanted everything to look good forever, even if it wasn't real. Glass grape cluster lamps were mood lighting at its most dramatic. Dozens of translucent globes, each shaped like a grape, glowed in deep purples, greens, and ambers. When lit, they turned an ordinary dining room into something out of a dream. Soft, mysterious, and just a little kitschy. They hung low over velvet chairs and wood-paneled walls, glowing like jewels in the half-dark. The light was romantic, almost cinematic, perfect for dinner parties and whispered conversations. Everyone who owned one swore it made their home feel modern, even if it looked like a disco met a vineyard. Each lamp was part light fixture, part sculpture, the kind of thing that made guests stop and stare. The glow wasn't just pretty, it was hypnotic, like candlelight with a twist of disco. And for a while, it made everyone feel a little fancier, a little more glamorous. When they finally went out of style, they didn't just fade, they disappeared, tucked into attics and basements. But once in a while, you'll see one light up again, and for a second, it feels like the room is alive with the past. Mirrored disco switch plates made even the smallest flick of a switch feel like a party. Tiny, shiny, and dazzling, they turned ordinary walls into miniature dance floors. In an era obsessed with sparkle and light, even the hardware had to shimmer. Each switch plate reflected the world in fragments, glittering glimpses of movement, laughter, and life. Guests could not resist catching their own reflections as they passed, adjusting hair or flashing smiles mid-step. They were proof that even the most functional things could have a little flair, a little fun. The reflection caught everything: sunlight, disco balls, and sometimes just the glint of someone's gold necklace. They were a symbol of optimism, of the idea that life could always have a little shine. Kids would stop to make funny faces in them, and adults liked how they made the room glow just a bit more. For something so small, they had big personality, a final touch of flair in homes that believed more was always better. Today, their tiny mirrors may be dulled by time, but they still catch the light just right, reminding us that once, even the switch to turn on a lamp could feel like an invitation to dance. Wall-mounted intercom systems were the original in-home networks, part communication tool, part power move. You could call from the kitchen to the basement or yell at your kids to come to dinner without leaving your chair. Each one had a row of buttons, a tinny speaker, and a little hum that filled the quiet between uses. Every family had its own set of rules for the intercom: when to call, when to answer, and when to pretend you didn't hear. Sometimes it carried secrets, sometimes jokes, sometimes just static and laughter. And even when it didn't work perfectly, it still felt like living in the future. Every kid dreamed of pushing the all-call button just to hear their voice echo through the house. The static, the crackle, it was pure magic. Parents loved it for convenience, but it also gave every house a strange, futuristic heartbeat. They were symbols of progress, proof that technology had found its way into the home. Of course, most of them stopped working after a few years, but no one wanted to take them down. They stayed on the wall, silent reminders of a time when calling someone meant pressing a button and hoping they could hear you through the static. The Zenith Space Command remote was the first true clicker, and it earned that name literally. Each press of a button made a sharp, metallic click, a tiny sound wave that told the television what to do. It felt futuristic, even magical to change channels without getting up. That satisfying click echoed through the living room like a badge of power. Every father claimed ownership of it, guarding it as though it were the crown jewels of the household. It was small, simple, and mechanical, a reminder that technology once had weight, sound, and presence. Families marveled at it, arguing over who got to hold it like it was a royal scepter. The sound itself became part of the living room soundtrack. Click, pause, static, laughter. The technology was simple but brilliant, a small invention that made people feel like they were living in the future. No batteries, no lasers, just clever engineering wrapped in chrome and mystery. Today, its heavy feel and satisfying click are gone, replaced by silent plastic buttons. But nothing will ever feel quite as powerful as that sound that ruled the couch. Television antenna rotator boxes were tiny control centers that decided whether your picture was fuzzy or clear. A small knob on the console would turn the massive rooftop antenna outside inch by inch until the channel came in just right. Watching someone use it felt like witnessing a spaceship launch, slow, careful, and full of suspense. Sometimes the screen would flash and flicker wildly, the room filled with static snow as everyone held their breath. Children were given the honor of turning the dial, their small hands trembling with responsibility. The process could take minutes, but when the image finally came through, crisp and perfect, it felt like triumph. Even the smallest victory over bad reception was celebrated like a touchdown. Families would gather in the living room, shouting directions, "A little more! Stop! Go back!" It was teamwork, patience, and entertainment all at once. When the picture finally sharpened, everyone cheered like they had just cracked a code. The rotator box was proof that television wasn't just passive, it was an event. Those little dials connected homes to the world beyond the static, one careful twist at a time. Indoor smokeless ashtrays were the future of clean smoking, or so people thought. Small, battery-powered, and surprisingly loud, they promised to filter the air while you puffed away in comfort. Advertisements called them healthier alternatives, spinning smoke into progress. They hummed and whirred on coffee tables, pulling in wisps of smoke like little vacuum cleaners. The fan inside was tiny but determined, spinning faster the more people lit up around it. Cigarette packs sat proudly beside the ashtray, as though both belonged in a glamorous lifestyle ad. People swore the air felt cleaner, even though the smell never really left. It was a symbol of denial wrapped in chrome, the perfect marriage of addiction and modern invention. Guests were fascinated, leaning close to see if it really worked. It didn't, of course, but it made people feel a little less guilty. And that was worth something. In an era when ashtrays were everywhere, this one tried to rewrite the story. It was innovation meeting denial, wrapped in chrome and optimism. Now, they sit forgotten in thrift stores, silent relics of a time when even smoke could be sold as sophistication. Rolling record storage cabinets were the heart of every living room soundtrack. Compact, sleek, and usually made of faux wood paneling, they sat proudly beside the stereo system, the crown jewel of home entertainment. These wheeled carts held the soundtrack to entire lives, each sleeve worn soft from years of sliding in and out. Every home had its own ritual, flipping through the rows of vinyls, searching for just the right album to fill the air. The records smelled faintly of cardboard and dust, each crackle between songs whispering memories of Friday nights and teenage dreams. You could tell what kind of person someone was just by peeking at their collection. Music wasn't just heard, it was displayed, honored, and loved. The wheels on the bottom meant it could follow you anywhere, from living room to patio to basement jam sessions. Sometimes the lid doubled as a small table, perfect for setting a drink while your favorite song played through the static. It was furniture, but it was also identity, a monument to taste, sound, and the art of listening. Today, streaming gives us everything at once, but back then, you had to earn your playlist. Each record pulled from that cabinet felt deliberate, a choice, a mood, a memory that spun one revolution at a time. Butter warmers for popcorn bowls were pure indulgence disguised as convenience. Small, clunky, and powered by electricity, these gadgets promised to make movie night feel like the theater, one melted stick of butter at a time. You'd plug it in, wait for the red light to glow, and soon the air filled with that unmistakable smell of liquid gold. The melted butter would drip through a narrow spout, steaming as it hit the popcorn, soaking it in decadence. It was messy, glorious, and impossible to stop once you started. For kids, it felt like magic. For parents, it was a tiny rebellion against margarine and moderation. These little warmers made every film feel special, even if it was just a rerun on a small television set. Of course, cleanup was a nightmare. Butter splatters, oily cords, and that lingering smell that clung to the kitchen like perfume. But no one cared. The reward was worth it. Perfectly coated popcorn that tasted like happiness and regret in equal measure. In a world before air fryers and smart microwaves, this humble gadget was the pinnacle of home luxury. It didn't just melt butter, it melted away the ordinary. Automatic card shufflers were the sound of friendship, competition, and chaos rolled into one. Every bridge club, poker night, or family gathering had one sitting proudly on the table, humming with promise. You'd drop the deck inside, press a button, and wait for the mechanical roar that could wake the whole house. The cards would spin, click, and fly into neat little piles, except when they didn't, spraying chaos across the table. Still, everyone trusted it more than the friend accused of cheating. The whir of the machine became the unofficial anthem of game night, punctuated by laughter and mock outrage. Powered by 2C batteries, it was both miracle and menace, efficiency at its noisiest. Shuffling by hand suddenly felt prehistoric, and everyone took pride in their futuristic little helper. Of course, the batteries always died right when the stakes were highest, and someone had to finish the job manually anyway. But that was part of the charm. The automatic card shuffler didn't just mix cards, it mixed people together, turning a simple game into an event. Its plastic body may be long gone, but that sound, that rattling rhythm of camaraderie, still echoes in memory. Miniature desktop fans with metal blades were tiny, whirring miracles of cooling and danger. Perched on office desks or bedroom dressers, they promised relief from the summer heat, at the cost of your fingertips. Small but mighty, they hummed like tiny engines, slicing the air with metallic precision. Children were warned not to get too close, which of course made them impossible to resist. One curious finger too near the blades, and you learned instantly why those warnings mattered. But even with the risk, people loved them. The rush of air was sharp, immediate, and oddly satisfying. They had a solid weight to them, built from real metal instead of plastic, their motors humming with confidence. You could feel them vibrate through the desk as they worked, blowing papers everywhere but somehow making the heat feel bearable. Some came in pastel colors, others in heavy chrome, each one a symbol of how far home comfort had come. Today's fans are quieter, safer, and forgettable, but these little beasts had personality. They buzzed, they roared, and they lived dangerously. To own one was to flirt with risk and comfort at the same time, a tiny rebellion spinning at full speed. Television dinner compartment plates turned weeknights into rituals of simplicity. Made of thick melamine and molded into perfect sections, they promised order in a chaotic world. Meat in one space, potatoes in another, vegetables safely contained. They mirrored the frozen meals that filled supermarket shelves, those silver trays that defined convenience. The plastic plates made even leftovers feel like a planned occasion. Kids loved the little walls separating flavors, and parents loved not having to wash 5 dishes after a long day. Every clink of a fork against melamine was the sound of comfort meeting modernity. Families would sit in front of the television, plates in laps, the glow of the screen bouncing off gravy and mashed potatoes. It wasn't fancy, but it felt new, a way to eat that matched the pace of a changing America. The plates themselves were nearly indestructible, lasting years, even decades, without losing shape. They were symbols of independence and convenience, the quiet heroes of weekday dinners. And though they've faded into nostalgia now, their spirit lives on every time someone eats with one hand while watching television. For all their simplicity, those divided trays held something bigger. The feeling that home could be comfortable, uncomplicated, and just a little bit futuristic. Plastic pitchers from gas station giveaways were found in nearly every poor household. With each fill-up, you might walk away with a free pitcher plastered with a logo. Soon enough, families had cabinets full of mismatched plastic, all in odd colors and shapes. They poured Kool-Aid, iced tea, and water every day of the week. The lids rarely fit tightly, so spills were constant whenever someone poured too quickly. Over time, the logos faded, leaving ghostly outlines of oil companies or soda brands that once gave them away. Still, they held gallons of memories alongside gallons of cheap iced tea, becoming part of everyday meals. The handles often bent under the weight, and the lids never fit quite right, but they were too useful to toss away. Kids fought to pick their favorite color pitcher, even when they all looked equally cheap. At family gatherings, a half-dozen plastic pitchers lined the table, each one sweating condensation in the summer heat. Nobody cared that they were freebies, they worked. For poor families, they were as essential as silverware, and for years they kept homes running on thrift and resourcefulness. The hand crank egg beater was a rite of passage. Long before mixers plugged into walls, children stood on stools beside their mothers, gripping the cool metal handle and turning the crank with both hands. The beaters would spin in a blur, blending sugar, eggs, and flour into the thick beginnings of birthday cakes and pancake batter. It was not efficient, but it was intimate. You felt the recipe coming together. Your arms grew sore, but your heart grew full. The egg beater did not make noise. It did not break. It did not ask for anything but effort. Every kitchen had one, usually tucked in a drawer next to the wooden spoons and measuring cups, Its clinking metal gears were as familiar as the smell of vanilla extract. And somehow, everything tasted better when it had been beaten by hand. Then came stand mixers, food processors, and digital timers. The crank beater was cast aside as outdated, inconvenient, old. But in that loss, something human disappeared. Now it hangs on antique shop walls, a symbol of effort, patience, and care. It taught us that food was not just made, it was earned. Why did we stop believing that some things are better when you feel them in your bones? If your eyes ever hurt walking into a 1970s kitchen, the culprit was probably the floor. Vinyl flooring in that era came in every wild pattern imaginable: psychedelic swirls, checkerboard grids, paisley overlays that looked like melted wallpaper. It was meant to be durable, stylish, and easy to clean. In reality, it cracked, peeled, and clashed with every furniture update you attempted. Over time, the colors faded to an uncertain gray or yellowed from the sun. Families tried to cover them with throw rugs, but the damage was already done. The designs did not age gracefully. They just became harder to ignore. What was once considered expressive quickly felt chaotic and cheap. And yet, it was impossible to walk through a suburban home without seeing those dizzying tiles in at least one room. It was design overload from the ground up. But if you think that was bad, wait until you see what we were proudly hanging on our walls. It is one of those things you barely notice until it slides into action: pocket doors. Unlike the typical swinging door, pocket doors vanish into the wall when opened, like a magic trick you can walk through. They were the height of clever home design in the mid-20th century, especially in homes that wanted a clean, modern look without bulky doors breaking up the space. You would find them separating dining rooms from kitchens or closing off formal living rooms when company arrived. Over time, though, they became a pain. The tracks jammed, the rollers squeaked, and once one went off its rail, good luck fixing it without tearing open the wall. Slowly, builders turned back to swing doors, and pocket doors became a quirky throwback. But if those walls could talk, they would whisper about family dinners, polite goodbyes, and the satisfaction of sliding a whole room out of sight. Now, speaking of questionable style choices, wait until we step into the softest, strangest room in the house: the bathroom. Before open concept became the norm, the kitchen pass-through window was the perfect compromise. It was a small rectangular opening in the wall, usually with a sliding panel or shutters, that connected the kitchen to the dining room. You could serve dishes straight through, peek out to check on guests, or whisper a message without leaving your post at the stove. It was functional and a little bit fun, like a drive-through for your own home. Kids loved it because it felt like a secret door. Adults loved it because it saved steps. These pass-throughs became iconic in mid-century ranch homes and suburban houses. But as walls came down and kitchens turned into wide-open living spaces, the humble pass-through lost its purpose. Some were plastered over during remodels. Others became awkward holes in drywall with no clear use. But once, they made kitchens feel like command centers, like you could be in two rooms at once. What did we gain when we knocked down those walls? And what subtle joys did we lose? Worn quilts made from scraps were treasures stitched together by hand. Bits of old shirts, faded dresses, and worn-out sheets were cut into squares and sewn into colorful patchwork blankets. They were heavy, imperfect, and sometimes scratchy, but they carried stories in every piece of fabric. No two quilts ever looked alike, and that uniqueness made them feel almost magical to children who bundled under them. They smelled faintly of cedar chests where they were stored, carrying a scent of both history and home. Families saw them as proof that nothing was wasted. Every scrap could be turned into comfort. Mothers and grandmothers saved every scrap, no matter how small, because they knew it could one day keep a child warm. Kids traced patterns on the quilt before falling asleep, recognizing a piece of Dad's old work shirt or Mom's apron. Every winter, those quilts came out in stacks, piled high on beds to fight the cold nights without running up the heating bill. They were not just blankets, they were history stitched by hand. To this day, some of those quilts survive, softer and thinner, but still holding the warmth of a family's past. The Philco Predicta television looked like it belonged in a spaceship, not a living room. Its bold design, featuring a separate swivel screen perched atop a futuristic base, turned heads the moment it arrived in 1958. This was not just a television. This was the future. The Predicta came in a range of pastel colors, with names like Holiday and Pedestal. It was slim, sleek, and shockingly modern in a time when televisions still looked like wooden trunks. For the first time, you could turn the screen without moving the entire cabinet. It was clever. It was playful. It made you feel like tomorrow had already arrived. But the beauty came at a price. Technicians hated servicing it. Components wore out quickly. Still, families loved it. They gathered around it, cross-legged on shag rugs, watching black and white broadcasts with wide eyes. It made television magical. Not background noise, not distraction. Magic. But magic is fragile. And soon, newer sets with fewer quirks replaced it. The Predicta faded into memory, too strange for the mainstream, too delicate for time. Now it lives in vintage stores and collectors' basements, quietly glowing with nostalgia. How did the most visionary television of its era become a footnote in history? In the 1970s, having a built-in wet bar was a sign that you had made it. It meant you were a host, a social connector, someone who knew how to entertain with style. The mirrored backsplash, the chrome railing, the smoked glass shelves lined with liquor bottles. This was sophistication, suburban edition. But the reality rarely lived up to the fantasy. These bars were often shoved into corners of the basement, barely used except during holidays or awkward neighborhood gatherings. They collected dust, the plumbing rarely worked right, and the built-in mini fridges started leaking after a few years. Not to mention, America's relationship with alcohol shifted drastically in the decades that followed. The cocktail party scene began to fade. Suddenly, having a fully stocked alcohol station in your house felt less glamorous and more like a relic from your uncle's disco phase. What was meant to impress became an eyesore, especially when surrounded by orange carpeting and faux leather stools. So many of these bars were either ripped out entirely or turned into storage for board games and wrapping paper. But at least they were not a physical hazard. The next luxury home upgrade? That one came with a built-in trip and a bruised shin. Bathroom incinerators were exactly what they sound like. Tiny metal boxes installed near the toilet, designed to burn trash right on the spot. Sounds efficient, right? Maybe. But also, just a little bit terrifying. These units were popular for a short time in the mid-20th century, mostly in homes that were obsessed with cutting-edge convenience. They were meant for tissues, cotton balls, wrappers, and small bits of waste, not, let us be clear, diapers or anything major. You would flip a switch, hear a low hum, and then wait while your trash slowly vanished into ash. It was like having a personal bonfire inside your bathroom. Some even came with a little chimney that vented outside. Of course, the smell was something. And safety? Let's just say it was a different time. These machines were prone to overheating, and if you put the wrong thing in, you might get more flames than you bargained for. Eventually, people realized that trash cans and weekly pickups were a whole lot safer. So the bathroom incinerator quietly disappeared, along with the era of lighting your garbage on fire next to your shampoo. But while the bathroom was heating up, the beauty routines of the day were getting pretty cool. And I mean that literally. Just wait until you see the hairdryers. Before Bluetooth speakers and smart home assistants, there was the built-in wall radio. Usually installed near the phone nook or tucked into a panel above the kitchen counter, this was your portal to the world. With one turn of a giant knob, you could get the weather, farm reports, school closings, or your favorite midday jazz station. Some had small intercom buttons for calling upstairs or out to the garage. It was kitchen multitasking before anyone used the word. Moms would hum along while stirring soup or call the kids for dinner through the built-in speaker. You knew what time it was by the voice on the radio, not your phone. It was the soundtrack of daily life, soft static, local news, and old familiar jingles. Even the quiet moments felt fuller with it playing in the background. But as media moved to TV, then to handheld devices, these built-ins became obsolete. Wires were cut, faces painted over. Now, if you find one in an old house, it looks like a forgotten control panel from a spaceship. Once, it brought life into the kitchen. Now, it is just a silent square on the wall. We carry entire sound systems in our pockets today, but they do not echo down the hallway the same way. What did we lose when the kitchen stopped singing? Wire clotheslines in the backyard were the original dryers for poor families. Wooden clothespins held shirts, jeans, and sheets in the breeze, each one swaying under the sun. Electric dryers existed, but many families could not afford them or wanted to save on electricity. The clothesline became part of the rhythm of daily life. The smell of sun-dried sheets, stiff with fresh air, carried through bedrooms at night and felt richer than anything from a machine. Clothes flapped loudly in the wind, snapping like flags, and neighbors could read a family's laundry almost like a diary. Children loved running between the rows, ducking under damp sheets as if they were tents. On summer afternoons, the backyard became a maze of fabric, turning chores into play. Children ran between rows of laundry, playing tag among shirts that brushed their hair. And yes, every once in a while, a sudden rainstorm ruined the whole day's work, forcing families to start all over. Still, the clothesline was worth it. It was free, reliable, and woven into the fabric of home life in the 1970s, as ordinary as the roof over your head. Jell-O molds were not just recipes, they were performances. In the 1950s and 1960s, these shimmering towers of gelatin were the pride of dinner tables and potlucks alike. Suspended inside were slices of fruit, vegetables, nuts, and sometimes even meats, frozen in mid-dance by the wobble of lemon or lime gelatin. The molds themselves were often metal, shaped like flowers, domes, or decorative rings. Housewives practiced their releases with reverence, praying the mold would slide out cleanly with a satisfying thwack. The result? A glossy, surreal centerpiece. Guests gasped, children poked. Recipes were passed from neighbor to neighbor, each claiming their version was best. But these creations were not just about looks. Jell-O was cheap, shelf-stable, and forgiving. It let families stretch their ingredients during lean times. It made leftovers glamorous, and it brought a little joy to a time when people needed something bright and strange and wonderful. Eventually, tastes changed. Molds disappeared into cabinets. Jell-O became a snack cup. But for decades, it was art, it was pride, and it was love in a ring-shaped dish. When did we stop celebrating the food that made us smile before it ever touched our lips? Harvest Gold was never meant to be subtle. It was loud, it was proud, and for one strange decade, it coated every surface of the American kitchen. Paired with avocado green or orange, it was not just a color, it was a statement. You would find it on fridges, ovens, mixers, even your mom's favorite Tupperware. Advertisements promised it would bring warmth and cheer. But step into a Harvest Gold kitchen today, and it feels less like nostalgia and more like stepping inside a mustard bottle. The brightness that once felt cheerful began to feel aggressive, like a room that never let you relax. It faded fast, stained easily, and always seemed to clash with whatever came after. Like avocado green, it was an attempt to blend nature and futurism, and it failed at both. Once natural light hit a Harvest Gold refrigerator, the whole room seemed to glow with the hue of old mustard. Families tried to modernize around it, but nothing could mute the glare. And when the 80s arrived with chrome and pastels, Harvest Gold became the aesthetic equivalent of showing up in bell-bottoms to a wedding. Still, at least it stayed in its own space. The next design trend went everywhere and reflected everything. And if you think delivering milk through a wall sounds wild, wait until you hear about the homes that were designed for smoke. Back in the middle of the 20th century, smoking was not just accepted, it was expected, and American homes were ready for it. That is where built-in ashtray stands came in. These were not just ashtrays placed on coffee tables or countertops. No, these were recessed, often permanent fixtures embedded right into walls, armrests, and even lampstands. You could walk into a living room, and there it was, your own little designated smoke spot, classy as could be. Some were ceramic, some were chrome. A few even had lids to keep the ashes tidy. And they were everywhere, in kitchens, in bathrooms, in bedrooms. The ultimate sign of a home that was with it. Even guests had their own designated ashtrays. People took pride in them. Some were decorative, shaped like seashells or horseshoes. Others were sleek and utilitarian, and it was not just adults using them. Teens had their own, often built into the back of desks or vanities. Today, of course, the idea seems almost alien. We cover smoke detectors in foil just to cook without setting them off. But back then, these ashtrays were part of the home's soul. And when the culture shifted, they vanished fast, ripped out, tiled over, or collecting dust as relics of a time no one wants to remember, but no one can forget. But the next room? Oh, that is where the real memories were made. Think beanbags, shag carpet, and absolute chaos. The electric hot plate built into the countertop was not meant to replace the stove. It was there for the in-between moments, the simmering, the reheating, the lonely cup of soup on a gray afternoon. It looked like a single stovetop coil embedded right into the counter, usually near the sink or beside the coffee station. You turned the knob and it glowed red. No pots stacked on burners, no full stove required. For single servings or quick boils, it was perfect. They became especially popular in the 1950s and 1960s during the height of the modern kitchen boom. They were sleek, functional, and felt futuristic. But they came with risks. Open coils got hot fast, stayed hot longer, and were sometimes forgotten. Over time, homeowners chose to have more counter space instead. The coils vanished, replaced with cutting boards and clean surfaces. But those hot plates once stood for independence, the idea that a small meal still mattered, that a house could be big, but one burner could still feel like home. What part of the kitchen did we lose when we made everything smooth? Mason jars for everything were as ordinary as forks or spoons. They held canned peaches, green beans, and pickles stacked high in basement pantries. They became drinking glasses, leftover containers, or even piggy banks for loose change. For families on tight budgets, mason jars were the workhorses of the kitchen. They clinked together noisily when stacked, making cupboards sound like glass symphonies every time they were opened. Some were etched with company logos, reminding families of what once filled them long before they became water glasses. And because they were nearly indestructible, they outlived plenty of store-bought cups that broke at the first drop. Their clear glass showed everything proudly, from homemade jams to the iced tea poured on a hot summer afternoon. Kids often carried them outside as makeshift bug catchers, poking holes in the lid for air. A single box of jars could serve a family for decades, passed down from one generation to the next. Every cupboard rattled with their clinking, and every shelf seemed to sag under their weight. In the 1970s, poor families knew that mason jars were more than storage, they were survival. The cookie press was a piece of holiday magic that turned dough into art with nothing but a squeeze. With its interchangeable metal discs and ratchet-style handle, it could create dozens of perfect cookies in seconds, each one shaped like a flower, star, or tree. It was especially popular during the holiday season, when kitchens smelled of cinnamon and vanilla, and the radio played old Christmas tunes. The press made baking feel like a celebration. Kids would fight over who got to press the dough, and every batch felt like a tiny miracle. No rolling pin, no cookie cutter. Just one graceful push, and a perfect cookie appeared. The dough was usually soft and buttery, flavored with almond or lemon, and finished with a dusting of sugar or colored sprinkles. The cookie press was about more than efficiency. It was about beauty. It said your cookies could be delicious and delightful, but as store-bought cookies became more common, and as baking turned into a rare weekend chore instead of a family tradition, the press went quiet. It sits in the backs of drawers now, its discs scattered and forgotten. But for those who remember, it was a joy machine. When did we stop making food that felt like play? The step-down bathtub was supposed to bring spa-level relaxation into your home. Instead, It brought stubbed toes, twisted ankles, and more than a few emergency room visits. These sunken tubs looked sleek in design magazines, especially when surrounded by lush ferns and candlelight. But reality hit hard the moment you tried to use one. They were awkward to get into, nearly impossible to clean, and posed a serious risk to anyone with limited mobility. The edge was invisible to the untrained eye, so guests would stumble, kids would fall in, and elderly family members avoided them altogether. On top of that, the plumbing was often complicated. The water lines were hard to access, and the moisture around the recessed area led to mold problems. For a feature that took up so much space, the step-down tub delivered very little comfort in return. And unlike a regular tub, you could not just swap it out. It was built into the foundation. Expensive to install, expensive to remove, and all too easy to regret. But even if you managed to climb out in one piece, your next problem was likely waiting for you in the kitchen. Once upon a time, you did not just decorate your bathroom, you committed to it. We are talking full-color, floor-to-ceiling, single-shade devotion. Pastel pink, mint green, baby blue, or the ever-famous avocado, these were the color-coordinated bathroom suites of the 1950s through the 1970s. And when we say coordinated, we mean everything. The toilet, the tub, the sink, the tile, sometimes even the toilet paper, matched like a showroom display. First Lady Mamie Eisenhower helped popularize the trend with what people dubbed Mamie Pink. Entire homes were built with these candy-colored palettes baked into their bones. But of course, color trends change. What once looked stylish and luxurious now feels a bit like stepping into a cartoon. As minimalism took hold in the 1990s and 2000s, bold bathroom hues were slowly wiped away, replaced by whites, grays, and beige. Still, those vivid bathroom suites had a kind of joy to them. They made you feel something, even if that something was confusion. And if the color did not impress you, the next home feature definitely would, especially if you ever hated carrying a heavy laundry basket down the stairs. A countertop garbage chute might sound like science fiction, but it was once the definition of practical design. Picture this: a hinged square in the middle of your kitchen counter that popped open to reveal a direct drop into the trash bin below. You could chop carrots, peel potatoes, and then sweep the scraps in one motion. No fiddling with a trash can lid, no extra step. Just a quick flick of the wrist, and it was gone. In mid-century kitchens, these were genius, especially when you were making big meals and needed all the counter space you could get. It made cleanup feel like part of the flow, not an afterthought. One swift motion and the mess was gone before it had time to become a problem. But eventually, people began to worry about smells, pests, and hygiene. Builders stopped including the feature, and home cooks grew wary of having an open hole in the counter, even if it had a lid. Most of them were sealed shut or removed entirely during remodels. Today, you will only find them in untouched kitchens from the 1940s or 1950s. They are almost always covered in laminate or chrome trim, like a forgotten piece of spaceship tech. What other clever shortcuts have we erased without even realizing it? Mayonnaise jars as flower vases were another little touch of 1970s frugality. Once emptied, the glass jars were rinsed and filled with water, then placed in the center of the dining table with a bouquet of wildflowers or daisies. To a child, it looked just as beautiful as a vase from the store. Parents saw no need to spend extra money on fancy containers when a jar did the job perfectly well. Sometimes kids peeled the labels off the jars, leaving sticky glue that never fully came off. Others decorated them with stickers or crayon marks, turning them into personal masterpieces. No matter how they looked, those jars always held pride of place on the table, proving beauty did not need a price tag. A handful of flowers from the yard, tucked into a mayonnaise jar, turned even the simplest supper into something special. Some jars were painted or wrapped in ribbons to dress them up for Sunday dinners or birthdays. Others were left plain, standing proudly as a reminder that beauty could be made from anything at hand. Guests smiled politely, but no one laughed, because almost everyone had seen a mayonnaise jar holding flowers in their lifetime. In homes where every penny mattered, jars became decoration, and practicality blended seamlessly with pride. The chamber stove did something no modern appliance dares attempt. It kept cooking after you turned it off. That was not a gimmick. That was engineering genius wrapped in cast iron and chrome. Born in the early 20th century, the chamber stove became a quiet sensation in post-war homes for one incredible reason. It cooked with the gas turned off. Thanks to thick insulation and a sealed oven chamber, you could roast an entire chicken, switch off the flame halfway, and let retained heat do the rest. It was efficient, elegant, and oddly futuristic. And while it lacked a touchscreen or a clock, it came with something more valuable: trust. People swore by it. Some still do. The stove's signature thermowell let you slow-cook soups and stews deep inside a lidded metal pit while you handled the rest of your day. The burners had griddles built right in, and the oven door sealed tighter than a vault. It made people feel clever, like they were cooking smarter, not harder. But in the rush for newer, faster, shinier appliances, the chambers was quietly pushed aside. Too heavy, too bulky, too slow. Or so we thought. Why did we stop believing that doing more with less was the smartest design of all? Which of these lost household treasures do you remember best? Share your favorite in the comments, tap the like button if nostalgia hit home, and subscribe so we can keep unlocking the memories hiding in your own cupboards.